Welcome back to the Penguin Official Podcast. I'm your host, film critic Amy Nicholson. After each show episode, this is our chance to squeeze the creators, writers, directors, cast, and crew for even more dirt on what we just watched. There will be spoilers. Isn't that wonderful? Episode 6 jumps forward in time. Gotham City is frosted in snow and Oz has been busy. He's transformed the abandoned trolley line into his new base of operations. Neither Sophia nor Sal know how to find him, and that is information they'd kill for. As for Victor, he's ascended from Oz's driver into Oz's right-hand man. He's upgraded his sneakers and clothes, he has a bike, he has a gun. Watching Victor and Oz as roommates, Victor slow dancing with Francis Cobb, it almost feels like they and their fellow drug-running underdogs are forming a family. And this is a show that very much believes that families are stable and happy. Right? At least that's what I have in my notes. First, we're going to be speaking with producer Nick Towne and script coordinator Dan Fuchs. You guys, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
I want to talk about your origin stories and bonus points if you could make them sound dark and twisted and mysterious. How did both of you come to this project? Let's start with you, Nick.
Well, I mean, Dan and I were in the same drug running outfit for a long time. So that's pretty much why we were hired.
You do have suspicious faces.
I mean, yeah, you're lucky I'm even here. Got a lot of stuff going on the other side of the world right now. I came to it just through some people that I knew at HBO, and then I got to read the scripts, and I was kind of just blown away by the scripts. I went from being like, oh, cool, they're doing a show about the Penguin. That could be cool, to being like, oh my God, I can't believe what Lauren has done with these characters. I mean, it was pretty mind-blowing.
Wow, was it like that for you, Dan, or what's your story?
Yeah, similarly. The room had been going for a couple weeks, and they were looking for a script coordinator that had knowledge of like the DC sort of universe and comics and stuff like that.
And you do. You're a guy with a lot of knowledge?
Yeah, I've been reading comic books since I was a kid. I particularly love Batman and just that whole sort of universe of characters. So it was really exciting I didn't even know what the project was when I jumped on and applied to the job. But when I read that script after I got hired, similar to Nick, I was just like, this is something really special. It just taps into like that same sort of like character focus that all the great Batman adaptations have.
I mean, Dan, not everyone listening might know exactly what a script coordinator's role is on a set. So how would you describe it? Like, what's a typical day even when the show is like being written or in production?
So during the writer's room, I guess during the whole process, my main job is to make sure that any revision that needs to get into the script is applied to the script and then sent out to the entire crew.
Wow. Okay, well then let's jump into this episode, episode 6. This starts with snow falling in a sense that we have made the biggest time leap in this show so far. So how much time has passed?
It's been 10 days, I mean, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's been 10 days.
This is what, I mean, Dan is underselling what he does. Every single question that comes up constantly throughout the show as you're writing, like he absolutely knows everything there is to know about the show and the Batman universe. So 90% of the time we're all just going like, Dan, has it been 10? You got to tell me, like, what character am I writing? Who is this person? Please help. Just write it for me. But yeah, it's been 10 days. So it's been our biggest time jump in the show, aside from obviously flashbacks.
Well, but I mean, I'm thinking now, like, Dan, I'm picturing you as like this oracle up on high, sitting cross-legged, being the person who knows everything about everything. So 6 episodes in, I'm already kind of just like, there are so many double crosses, triple crosses, so many character shifts, so many personality shifts. How are you keeping track of everything? It can't all just be in your head.
It's a lot of espresso, but it's a lot of just like tracking documents. Like I have like timelines on my computer where it's like, this is how many days this has been. These scene takes place across these days in the daytime, the nighttime. Like this is the day and the date of everything. This newspaper was published on this date. You have to like basically just write it all down in like a Google Drive to make sure that if there's a question, I don't have to like scramble through thousands of emails. I can just go to that document and be like, okay, this scene takes place on this date. And so it makes life so much easier just to write literally everything down.
So you have a master document of literally everything that could have happened in the show.
Pretty much.
That's impressive.
And it is all in his head. he says that he has to look at the document, but Dan could actually, if you were like, what happened in the movie The Batman? Like, where does this scene take place? He could like just tell you the time code off the top of his
the
head.
Batman has never not been in my max queue since the show started.
Well, Nick, then what is your headspace like? I mean, when you're starting a project like this, what kind of prep or research are you doing?
I mean, right from the get-go, you're sort of reading. I remember I read Pain and Prejudice and The Long Halloween and Dark Victory, just sort of like catching up on the books that were inspiring, them when they were starting. And then aside from that, it's just kind of like thinking to yourself, okay, you're getting into the headspace of all of the characters, just finding your way personally, like emotionally, into what is it like to be each of these people, because you're going to have to write, each and every character.
Is there a character whose point of view is most comfortable for you to get into?
God, most comfortable. No, I don't think there's somebody that's like most comfortable. All of our characters are pretty fucked up. I mean, there's characters that are, everybody's fun to write in a different way. Oz is obviously a ton of fun to write because you just kind of like be like, okay, if I was just pure id, how would I be functioning? Sophia is always challenging because she as a character is evolving and changing as the show goes on, and she herself is looking for who she is. I mean, she was just so wronged. If you just kind of start there emotionally, you find your way through her, And then Victor's kind of like we've all been Victor. We've all been young and naive, so.
I was young and completely with it.
I got that sense.
That's not true at all. But then, I mean, people in this world can't even agree on the psyche of the other people in this world. Like, there's a moment in this episode I want to ask about where, Sal and Sophia are talking about Oz, and Sal calls Oz a weed, something that thrives in the ignored cracks. And Sophia says that Oz likes the spotlight too much to stay hidden. So who do you think is right?
I mean, I got to give that one to Sophia. I mean, Sal is kind of speaking from a place of pain and grief, and he's describing accurately, I think, a tactic that Oz survives by being a weed. Lauren always talked about how, like, in the Batman's looking down on the city from above, and the Penguin is looking up from the, the tunnels, up from the bottom of the gutters of the city. And so I think in that sense, Oz is a weed, and he'll do anything he has to survive, and he's impossible to fucking kill. But I think that Sophia is right about him in essence, is that he wants to be Rex Calabrese. He wants to be somebody that is beloved in the spotlight, admired by everybody. And that's more true to who he is, I think.
But I mean, this scene, like Sal and Sophia making a family dinner of a sort, Oz tenderly telling Victor to go home and get some sleep, Victor slow dancing with Francis. It feels like in this episode that people are rebuilding newer personal alliances, but I'm wondering, is family too strong a word?
Not at all. I mean, thematically, the whole episode is deeply connected to family. Each character in their own way is struggling to figure out what family means to them and how to find family. My mind immediately jumps to, Sophia, in the sense that she's kind of getting these examples throughout the episode of what a family could have been like, whether it's like you're just talking about late at night with Sal. It's kind of like when you sleep over at a friend's house, when you're like a kid and maybe you wake up late and your friend is asleep and you go to the kitchen and their parents are up and it's just like you and their parents. And you kind of get this weird glimpse into what it would be like to be a part of this family. I think she gets that kind of glimpse in that scene. And then she obviously gets a glimpse in her scene with Eve and seeing what, what a found family can be like and what loyalty from a family looks like. And then you've got, in the end, she sees that Oz has a secret family. So like family, each character, I mean, Oz obviously trying to protect Francis. Victor, whether it's wise or not, he's, put his bet in on Oz and he's trying to build a family there with him and Francis. So I don't think it's too big of a word to use at all.
Well, no, but I'm also wondering, with their historical experiences with family, is family an F word?
Certainly, I think in Gotham, in this version of Gotham, it is. A thing that we talked about early on is that Oz sees love as transactional. And I think to a certain extent, he's not the only person. Even though I think his version of that is the most pronounced, he's far from the only character to view it that way. And I mean, Carmine certainly viewed it that way. Sal, to a certain extent, views it that way. He's the most unlike the other criminals of Gotham. But I think that every family in this version of Gotham has to view that love as transactional.
Well, then, Dan, tell me about the change we see in Victor this episode. Just even visually, he's wearing more expensive clothes. He's got nice sneakers. He's riding a motorcycle. He's got a gun. We see some external stuff. Tell me the full picture.
I feel like the conversation we always had with Victor in this episode was like, it's him growing into that role that Oz wants him to be in, or Oz expects him to be in. If 3 is sort of the tipping point of him deciding to stick with Oz, this is the final tipping point into being that protege that Oz wants him to be, being the person that's able to commit violence.
Like him shooting Squid. Like that's this tipping point we're talking about?
Exactly. Yeah, I think because I think a younger Victor, I say younger, maybe 2 weeks earlier, but an earlier episode version of Victor would have probably gone to Oz and asked him to take care of Squid, and this is the moment he realizes that there's no one that's going to do it for him in this line of work. He has to do it.
I mean, Nick, what do you think for you was the hardest thing to get right in this episode?
I would say the hardest scene that we had to work on was Sophia Eve. That was just something that there was just so much at play in that scene, between the amount of exposition that you had to get out in a very, as much of a non-exposition-y way you could. There's so many micro beats. There's 2 people feeling each other out, trying to test each other moment to moment. You got one person that's fighting for their life. Even that scene is just using all the experience that she's developed as a sex worker to try to read this person and figure out if there's a weak underbelly anywhere in there, so that maybe she can get out of this situation alive.
I hadn't thought of that. I think of Sophia as being this mastermind, but Eve's job is literally figuring out what people want to hear.
Yeah, and I mean, Sophia says something like, you know what people want to hear. You're good at saying what people want to hear. And I think in that scene, to me, Eve is really looking for, she's kind of balancing this feeling of like, I'm dead and I know it, with, well, if there's a chance, maybe there's a way out for me. And I think that she finds it when she's able to say, if you kill me, then you're going to be a killer of sex workers just like your father. And that's the last thing Sophia wants to become, is her father. So she's now in an impossible situation.
But the torture of that beat. Sophia's heading out the door. It's almost done.
Yeah.
What makes Eve snap and say, I'll tell you where he is?
I mean, she has just learned something, that she knows that Oz is, like she says, a narcissist and a killer and a scumbag. But when Sophia reveals to her, he helped cover up the crimes of Carmine killing your family, your friends, your coworkers, your family. She realizes, Oz is even more depraved than I realized. And in that sense, like she says, Sophia deserves her shot. I think Eve is very pragmatic and practical. Maybe she doesn't think that Sophia is going to survive confronting Oz. Certainly history would say that people don't tend to survive confronting Oz. But she deserves her shot, And I think that that's the camaraderie that they find in each other in that scene, in that moment.
Do either of you have a moment in this episode that is just your little treasured favorite thing that you really hope people watching notice?
There's a lot of little moments that I like in this episode. Well, yeah, there's a silly answer and then there's a more sincere answer.
Oh, I want both.
My silly answer is I couldn't believe that I got the line, "You think you can just raw dog the people of Gotham with an invisible dick in there?"
You wrote that down thinking they're not going to let this go through?
I was like, that was actually the moment when I was like, oh my God, I can really be myself in this room. I can trust that if whatever the weirdest, darkest, most horrible swing I take has a place. And Lauren was just like, really liked it. And I was so thrilled. And then I think the moment that I kind of love is, Oz telling Victor to just go get some sleep. There's not I don't think of Oz as being like an empathetic guy, but there's something that's like the closest he gets to empathy kind of in that moment. It's like he's been where Victor is. And there's just something close to sweet about that, even though it's toxic as hell.
What about you, Dan?
I think my favorite moment is Oz fixing up Francis again after finding her in the bathtub. I think, similar to what Nick's saying, I think it's rare to see real empathy from Oz and real love. And it's something that he would never show externally, that kind of care for another human being. And there's something so vulnerable about that. And it strips, this episode I think is so great because it strips back Oz in ways we haven't seen yet. And forces you to look at that vulnerable side. And I mean, both Colin and Deedee are just absolutely incredible in that scene, particularly Deedee talking about how she wants Oz to handle her condition. So I think that scene is absolutely beautiful.
With scenes that are that emotional, you kind of have to be like, okay, I'm going to sit down and confront this reality right now. Yeah.
Well, you guys got me really much. We come in talking about being drug runners. We leave talking emotions. Guys, this is such a fun conversation. Thank you for coming in, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Next up, we have the return of series creator, executive producer, and showrunner Lauren LeFranc, along with the exquisite Deirdre O'Connell, who plays Francis Cobb. Deirdre, 2 years ago, you won a Tony Award for Best Actress. In your acceptance speech, you said, "Let me, standing here, be a little sign from the universe to make weird art." Is there some weird art in The Penguin?
Oh, yes, there surely is. I mean, I don't think weird begins to describe it, or art. I feel like Lauren and everyone involved in this project put together a group of mad men and mad women, particularly, who went crazy making the art that they really, really needed and wanted to make. And the fact that ended up coming together as this event is kind of amazing, because you can tell when you're involved in something. I wasn't at the very beginning, but the beginning of shooting all the way to the end, and that it does stay. It does stay the course, and it does stay complete in a kind of way that you can tell when something starts to get punched down or managed. And this one never really. They might have tried to manage it, whoever they are, the forces of normalness, but they didn't succeed. It's wild. It's very, very wild and very, very beautiful.
Well, there's so much more to talk about, because especially in your relationship here with Oz, I mean, unlike The Death of the Waynes, which has been played in Batman productions over and over and over again, there is no set history of the Penguin and his mom. You know, like in Burton's Batman Returns, she's this socialite who dumps her son in the sewers. In the TV show Gotham, she's a Hungarian immigrant and a real sweetie. So I'm curious for you, Lauren, what was on your mind creating this dynamic where his mom is his princess, but also a bit of a mommy Macbeth?
Well, I did a lot of research and I wanted to just know what was out there in the comics for the Penguin. And I read one called Pain and Prejudice. And there was a scene, a drawing in it with a mom in a bathtub and Oz there by her side that I took inspiration from, that then plays in episode 6 in a very, very different way. But I thought there was something very interesting about it because there was a darker female figure in his life, a darker mother in that comic. So that sparked something for me. And then I did base Francis a bit on my grandmother on my dad's side. Ophelia. She was a Mexican immigrant and moved to the States with my dad, and it was just her and my dad. And she actually treated him like a king, but also was extremely domineering, and very aggressive, and would dress him up in little suits to go to school. And, I think was isolating in a lot of ways, and had a wicked sense of humor, but nothing like Francis. And certainly she would be put to shame by the idea of Francis's potty mouth. Like, she really wouldn't have appreciated that at all. But then really taking that sort of inspiration and then thinking about who would be Oz's mother. Why is Oz the way he is? It has to be rooted in this woman. And for me, that really unlocked a lot of things, because I wanted him to respect women. And so that makes sense. He needs to respect his mother more than anybody in the world. She needs to be a powerful enough force and edgy enough and emotional enough for a guy like him to have a mother like that. And everything she is really informs him. So I worked a little bit backwards because I had Oz to start with. But I wanted to make sure that Francis was fiery and vibrant and passionate, and had some rage built up inside of her for ways we don't fully understand until deeper in the season. But all of those things made sense because this is the mother of this man who we come to get to know in the season.
The word bathtub that you said really pops me, because I do want to talk about that intense scene in this episode. In fact, let's even listen to it. I'll set it up really fast. Oz is finding Francis vulnerable in the bathtub. He's pulling her out. She's upset. And Francis is forcing Oz to promise that if she becomes a vegetable, he will kill her.
You're my mom. They ask me to do something. It ain't natural.
No. No, don't you pussy out of me, Oswald. I swear to God. I have given you everything. I have given you everything.
Yeah, you have.
Say you'll do it. You mean it. Because you love me. Say it. Say it.
All right. I'll do it.
It was a scene that always sort of shimmered in the distance. It was always there, kind of very much intact, very much what you wrote from the first time. And we struck for 6 months. So there was a long chunk of time before we were going to shoot that scene when we had already started working on that episode. And I remember it was first up, my first day back. And
That was your first day back?
And I went to Bill and I said, Bill, I'm terrified. I don't know if I can. I haven't acted for 6 months. We haven't been together. We haven't been in a room. I'm so scared of that scene. Do you think we can put it second? And he did. He switched the schedule around. That was thank you, sir, for that, because I really was in a state of terror about doing it. I had to be naked. There was that. But that, in a funny way, as I look back on it, that being naked was sort of the technical problem that got us into the situation where the set was so beautiful and concentrated. So I recommend, if you have a really hard scene, just tell people you're going to be taking your clothes off, and you'll make a really safe set.
Wow. Does that work in real life too?
Maybe it might.
You could try it.
You might, but because you have to have a tinier crew, and because everybody, is hyper aware of the fact that there's going to be a naked person and that you have to all take care of them, it does a really good thing.
Well, that speaks though,
very gentle.
Deedee, that speaks to you though, because you offered that up, because we could have certainly shot the scene without that, but you felt, and I rightfully so, that to showcase Francis as vulnerable as it was to do that. And so that was, and then we just obviously took every precaution to make sure that it was an intimate situation and that it was a closed set, and that, made sure that Deedee could feel as comfortable as possible. But it speaks so much to the way that Deedee you work, because it's just vulnerable and open. And I think maybe your theater background in part really informs that you're, every time you walk onto set, you're just present and there and let's go, even if it's a very emotionally challenging scene like that.
Deirdre, how do you play foggy the way that Francis is? Like, how do you have presence in a scene while also seeming like you're not totally sure what's happening in the rest of the scene?
And unfortunately, my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but I think he probably had Lewy body dementia. And, that's a misdiagnosed disease. And looking back on his symptoms, I feel like, oh, he actually. So I was with him a lot while he had that. So unfortunately, and I'm sure it's true for so many of us, we actually know what that's like to be in a room with somebody who's going through that. Then I was also lucky enough to work with a woman who's a physical therapist for people with Parkinson's and Lewy's, and there's also a world of amazing generosity on YouTube, oddly enough, where people just will, as a tool to help other people who are in the same situation, caregivers will just make videos about, here's how to do this, here's what happened to me that day, here's a good way to handle this kind of problem that comes up. And this one mother and son made a whole series. They've made, I think, 55
Wow.
half hours of, and some of them are an hour long, of them just living. And that, though, I sent Lauren a bunch of those because those people were so generous with their life and what they were going through. And I was getting to watch like a mom and son go through it. So but also I was so reminded of how much work it was that my dad was doing all the time, how there's this constant internal labor when you have dementia. It's not just like spacing out. It's actually like working really hard on something that no one else knows about and no one else can see. I always had that sense that my dad was working. And then he was.
Like working to
organize what the heck is going on, working to understand why his body feels so different to him than it did in the past, working to understand who anybody is, working to understand how to put words together, working to begin to be able to communicate what he's going through to other people, working to protect himself, working to defend himself against, like, suddenly somebody's just coming in the room and saying it's time to change your clothes, and he doesn't know anything about the context. I just watched him work so hard. But then there was another little clue that happened to me. It was actually my acting coach who talked about it, because she said she was talking about how a friend of hers who had slight dementia, who was still working in television, and she talked about how her friend actually had lost the border between being on a set and being concentrated and ignoring all the equipment and ignoring all the other people and not being able to do that anymore. And I started to just like take that as, okay, Dee, who's often utterly confused and utterly baffled by what's going on a real set, can just be utterly baffled by what's going on the real set. So there's a lot of times when I was not looking at the crew or the equipment like you're supposed to. And it sort of like adds up to the same thing where I just let all the chaos in.
That feels kind of freeing.
It was very freeing. I'm like, only want to play people who can actually, look at the boom operator randomly, because you do see them, and pretending you're not seeing them is a big part of the job.
I want to even jump back a couple episodes, because a little bit before this, in episode 5, Francis says that Oz has big dreams like his father, but that Oz isn't like him. And that's kind of the only hint we really get of what Oz's father was like. Is there more backstory, Lauren, even for you, that like you mapped out, that you discussed with Francis, that maybe even you just know yourself, that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I always, pegged Oz's dad as a dreamer, but without drive, because I think that's something that would upset a person like Oz and upset a person like Francis. That I always imagined he was, a bit of a nobody, and that would be based on part of why Oz so desperately wants to be a somebody, and that Frances was a badass single mom out of the gate, even when she was in a relationship with Oz's father. She was running the show, and that, a woman like Frances, when she's younger, could be swept up by a charming guy like Oz's father, but then realize, I've committed to somebody who actually, they have a new dream over here and they want to do that, but they don't follow through. And here's another thought I have. Here's another idea. And they don't follow through. And then Frances is the steady person who has these 3 boys. And she has to be the one who's working. You know, she's an accountant. She does the books for, you know, a bunch of different gangsters. And so that's something that made a lot of sense. Is in the writer's room, we discussed her more and her backstory for us to be able to inform that. And so we lightly touch on Dad in that way, that like it's derogatory for both of them. If Francis is saying you're like your father, that's something that she knows will get under Oz's skin. And Oz doesn't like being compared to his father just the same, because they're both Francis and Oz are 2 very driven, very motivated people, and they share that.
Yeah, this episode has this neat metaphor where Oz is really trying to get the electricity back on because Francis is not happy eating cold eggs, not getting to listen to her music. And it is this neat metaphor here because, you know, literally Oz needs to get power to make his mom happy. But it does seem to touch on those things, that she's this energy spark for him, this thing that makes her boy move and hustle and think and dream. And it even kind of made me wonder how much of what I think of Oz's quirks are actually her quirks. Things like the love of old movies, the love of soft music. Like, it's not impossible that he fell in love with Dolly Parton 9 to 5 because growing up, that's a song his single mother, she really liked.
Oh, yeah. No, it is. It's 100% possible.
Yeah,
it is based on that.
Absolutely. She liked that song a lot.
Yeah.
She wished she could work 9 to 5.
Yeah.
I think she had to do nights too.
Yeah.
She had all those books sitting in the apartment all the time. I love that idea. I had never thought of it like electricity, but I did often have the sensation in some of those scenes with Colin that it was like trying to light a pilot light that was starting to go out. He would either become afraid or do something stupid or become humiliated. I felt I think that the thing that they have in common is they cannot bear humiliation. And they cannot bear being disregarded. And sometimes
she even has that line in here. Yeah. If I lose my dignity, what else do I got?
Yeah. They have built a life out from pure dignity, from pure searching for dignity and pure smarts and labor, and not had nothing given to them, and also just had to be willing to be humiliated a lot of the time, and be willing to be the guy who's the driver, the woman who's delivering the numbers, the woman who's, you know, who knows what other favors she's willing and able to do to just kind of get through the raising of those 3 kids, and she, I think she carries it. She carries the chip on her shoulder about that.
And I think the other thing too is, like we discussed as well, is when, you know, we know Oz's brothers have died and we don't really know why or what happened. But with that, I think comes a very heightened relationship between Francis and Oz. It's just the 2 of them now. So all the love that Francis had across 3 boys is put into one man, and all her hopes and dreams for whatever this person could do across 3 boys is now into one. It's all put into one person. And that always felt like an interesting thing to just at least subtly explore, in part why she's so intent on having him succeed. There's a lot of deeper reasons for that we unpack a little bit later in, but like that is one of them, I think.
Yeah, they're very isolated. They're very on their own. I feel like whatever those backstories about the dad are of her family, you know, where's like Francis's sisters? Where's it? There's nobody. It's the 2 of them. They had to let go of a lot of relationships to just keep this clarity. She's, you know, she doesn't suffer fools. So, you know, I think somebody has one chance to diss her and then she never speaks to them again, I think, or diss him in front of her, you know. So I think they moved through a lot of people. There's just 2 left.
But this emphasis on dignity, you know, this episode, we talked about the brutal bathtub scene. Let's talk about the scene that's in here that I think really balances it out. You know, this beautiful scene where Oz restores Francis's dignity by fixing her up to look nice. There's so much intimacy in that. Tell me about that day of filming.
That day, you know, I knew what we were going to shoot, and I was excited about it, and I thought it was going to be great, and I didn't expect to be so undone by the sensation of shooting that scene. It was very, very straightforward and simple, and we had just done that
What
other thing
undid you
together.
about it?
It was just literally the sensation of being taken care of being cared for in this really particular way. It was, and having to surrender to it in a way that I think was hard for Francis. I don't think, there's a lot of times when she pushes him away. But to let him in that much, and it was literally just the feeling of the little brushes on my face, like, it made me weep. It was so delicate. The touch was so delicate. The effort of this big awkward man to be that delicate. It's a scene that we knew was coming and we fought to keep, but I didn't expect it to feel the way it felt. I thought, oh yeah, that'll be a good scene. And it felt, I was just undone by it.
Yeah, it was shot beautifully too by Kevin Bray and David Franco, the DP. I mean, it's really, yeah, but the two of you connecting in that. And I think partly for me, at least, because I know you both fought for it. And I'm so glad you did, because it really was something that no one wanted to cut. It was just we only have Oz to be able to be on set for so long. How do we even achieve all the work that we have to do? And for Colin to be like, we got to do this. And Dee Dee's like, let's do it. And because it meant everybody staying longer. I think that feeling, I think you two brought to that scene, that vulnerability and that, like, we're getting away with something and let's make sure it's special. And you had very little time to get all of that. And there's an energy in that scene I think you feel. And I think it's interesting also for Oz, because he's putting his mother back together again in the way he wants her to be.
Mm-hmm.
There is an element of he's dressing up his mother to look the way he remembers her to be, as well. That's like a little twisted, but it's still beautiful and emotional, but a little dark.
Yeah, definitely.
says,
I have had that thought. I don't know if you guys have, of like, what happens if I can't take care of myself? Can I teach someone to put my makeup on? Like a man. Can I teach a man to put my makeup on so that I'll feel like I look the way I want to look when I go out of the house? It's a question.
That's a scary thought. What if they make you look like a clown? What if
Yeah,
they make
what
you
if they
look like
really
the
don't know
Joker?
how to do your lipstick exactly right? So the makeup artists were like showing him how to do everything. It was really sweet.
And at the end, he kind of caps it by saying that Francis looks gorgeous and powerful like Gilda, which is the second time that Rita Hayworth has come up. Is she a touchstone here at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was writing the first episode, I knew I wanted Oz to be interested in old movies because I felt Francis was. And that was something that was important to establish. He loves jazz because Francis loves jazz. He loves Dolly Parton because Francis loves Dolly Parton. He and his mom would watch old movies together. And I wanted something to represent that. And then I thought about Gilda because I was thinking about, put the blame on Mame and just how that twist could happen and how he could come to a realization through something in a more atypical way was the hope. And then I rewatched Gilda because I hadn't seen it in a while. And Rita Hayworth is just incredible. I mean, even when it was playing live on set. I was on the couch sitting in between takes watching her because it's insane what she has. She has this magnetism and this charm that I feel like both Francis and Oz would love and idolize and appreciate. And so she's redhead. She's got qualities of Francis.
Deirdre's definitely got some Rita energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I dream I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it felt right to say this woman who is, embodied in this way, like to mention her again, that Oz knows that that's who would make his mom happy to hear, like that she looks like that, to compare her to Rita Hayworth.
I love that. We do have to wrap up, but I want to squeeze in one question just real fast because I think maybe some people are wondering this. Do those awful bruises on Francis's arm have a story?
Well, a lot of Lewy body dementia, people who have Lewy body dementia, it is often misdiagnosed as Parkinson's. And part of the reason that it is because they fall a lot. And so in 105, when Victor comes upon Francis in that episode, he notices a bruise. And it's to just tag that things have gotten progressively worse for her, that she is starting to lose her balance, and that, Oz is trying to create a bit of a facade for himself, really. He wants to believe his mom's fine. He has to believe that she's fine. There can't be anything wrong with her. But then he sees her exposed in the bathtub, and he sees those bruises, whether he wants to acknowledge them or not. We see them. And so it's something that's in your face for Oz. Pay attention, look at this. And obviously their conversation where she asks him to help her die, and if it comes to that, is a brutal conversation, but one that feels like, Oz, it's time to wake up to the reality. And Francis is Oz's ticking clock through this series. You know, his primary drive is all rooted in his mother, his love for his mother, to gain her affection, to have her be proud of him. All he needs and wants in life is for her to express her pride towards him. And it's not easy to get that from her. And certainly not easy, you know, when she's not physically and emotionally doing well.
I love it. Guys, this was such a good conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See y'all later. And now we are going to be speaking with Hair Department Head Brian Badie and Makeup Department Head Martha Melendez. Welcome, you two. Thank you for talking to us about episode 6.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
When you're just sign on to something like The Penguin, what is the very first thing you do to start? Where do you start getting into the headspace of a show like this?
For myself, I mean, of course, reading the scripts, speaking, having conversations with the creators. And then from there, everyone's creating a story that's tied to that story. So mine is like, okay, how can I create a story with my makeup that ties into everything else?
So you're thinking of it narratively, and you're having tons of conversations, it sounds like.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Brian, what are you guys talking about in this process?
Well, for me, during the process, there's a lot of collaboration actually. But for me, from the base of it, I looked at it as the world of DC, like this parallel universe. So I was trying to figure out, how do I first come up with designs that are more of this world and not necessarily use real life as inspiration for everything, and then try to incorporate some fashion along with, like, you know, innovation and also just to develop the characters as we go daily. It's a process just for character development, but just my base train of thought was, how do I create something new and something fresh for this world? I was trying to do something we haven't really seen before.
Does that mean you're looking at illustrations drawn by comic book artists who might not know anything about hair, and then trying to figure out how to take their inspiration, their core ideas, and how to make something in that tone in your reality, in actual reality, actual hair?
Well, I wouldn't say illustrations exactly, but any form of inspiration, even the streets of New York. If I'm on the subway, I'm seeing cool inspirations that I can bring into my everyday life at work. With this particular one, with Sophia, for example, Kristen had a lot of vision as well, and she's also very plugged in with fashion. So it was great to work with an actor who had a strong voice coming into it. So we really collaborated, particularly for her look, for example.
Well, I mean, speaking of Kristen, actually, yeah, let's really talk about Sophia. I want to leap back to like the most innocent Sophia, you know, earliest Sophia in the timeline, ponytail, fancy luncheon Sophia, and hear from you how her look has evolved.
We wanted to make sure that there was that innocent Sophia that was going to be very different from the present Sophia after she goes through the betrayal of her father, after her 10 years in Arkham, what life did to her there. And it's like a de-evolution of Sophia. And I think that's a term that we actually used quite a bit.
De-evolution?
Yeah, because she was this refined young lady, innocent. Her father's this mob boss, and she has these recessed memories that she's not even thinking on, and she is the face of the Falcone family, right? She is the one that ushers them into the more elite crowd. So she's the refined Sophia before the world gets to her, and now it's a de-evolution to evolve her into a new Sophia.
Well, Brian, one thing that really leapt out at me this week is Sophia's new shag cut. It kind of had this Jane Fonda vibe, like Jane Fonda at the height of the protest days, when she was like the most polarizing woman in the world.
Yeah, for me, the evolution of Sophia was quite fun to do through hair because I'm gonna start with the earlier looks to get because the final look is like the big reveal for us particularly, and so the way I tried to play it for her as an innocent, have some sense of innocence, like when she's with her father, she's still daddy's little girl, so to speak. She's under the father's rule, so she's coming across very innocent, very young. We tried to play her young, so I did hairstyles that were more associated with younger girls from that type of world.
Right,
Um,
like the ponytail, like the bump,
the ponytail, the half up, half down is very like innocent, very classic type of young lady. And you know, when she gets out of Arkham and she comes into the Oz world, she's given, I call it like a Chanel look, very like pulled up, still understated. I think her whole goal was to be unassuming and to wear a costume. So with that, I incorporated all of these components to tell that story through hair, just to be like unassuming. She's in this world of men, like she's coming through like a conservative, classy woman. Like she's not threatening. How could she be? Look at her. She's, you know, it's very like Chanel, like I hate to use it, but demure.
Oh no, the new
I know I
buzzword.
had to
Oh no,
slide
you
that
did it.
in there. I slid it in. Okay. So, and from there, the big reveal as she cut her own hair, she's like, I guess, sort of tired of playing this game and putting up this front. So, what would that hair be? So, we call it a wolf cut now, which is a shag, which goes more towards mullet. The final cut is more like a mullet. The shag is the middle cut. So that was like the first stage of, okay, I'm about to lose it and just show my crazy side. So that's kind of how we came about that. Like, how do we tell a story through hair? So it was a little edgy. It's kind of like uneven, not precise, a little like crazy looking. And so that was that. And then the final is the mullet, which we call it's like an elevated version of the other. And we just incorporated more fashion and tried to use the points as like, to tell like, I don't know, to come across like evil, but with not losing fashion ever, if that makes sense.
It does, but I need to know, Brian, are you trying to make mullets cool again, or are they cool again and I just missed it?
Mullets have always been cool to me. I'm obsessed with mullets, and thank God Kristen loves mullets because it was definitely an opportunity that like a career first that I get to do like a full fashion mullet, and I don't think anyone else will wear it again. So I'm very grateful for this character and for Kristen. Let me tell you, I love that mullet.
Well, Martha, I want to ask you also about her eyeliner. You know, it has made a bold shift. A few episodes ago, it was on her upper lips, but now it's like underneath. It's extreme. It's almost Egyptian. What is the story?
I want to go back to the beginning as well. Like she starts out like this deer caught in headlights when she's younger, right? And as when she comes out, like Brian said, still looking, trying to still present a little bit of the past, but not fully. But by the time we get to the underlying makeup, for us, makeup became more like a war paint.
Like she's going into battle.
Yeah, she's going into battle. Yeah. And when the liner went underneath below, it was like I'm about to turn the world upside down.
I like that inside out, flipping around.
Yes, flipping it
Oh,
around.
that's so cool. I mean, I'm so glad that we are talking though for this week's episode because it has a moment that I think really speaks directly to the power of hair and makeup. I want to talk about the scene where Oz takes a beat with his mother, bonds with his mother, grooms her to look beautiful. Tell me about that scene. Let's start with you, Martha.
For that moment, that intimate moment between Oz and Francis when he's doing her makeup and it's putting her together because Oz remembers and he does the makeup that she has back when she's younger. It's like for us, when we discussed it, it was almost like a moment like she's frozen in time. When he was a kid, the makeup that she wore, like when you see her when she's younger, it's that same look. It's the same, almost the same colors. Maybe slight variation because years have passed. And for us, we married it with a little bit of a touch of the 40s.
Right, the Gilda, the Rita Hayworth.
Yes, yes, yes.
Like,
That
she's growing up looking back watching those old movies and wanting to be Rita Hayworth when
right.
she's a child.
So probably her makeup is still frozen. She was fashion forward when she was younger. Even though she lived where she lived, she was always put together. And that's the way that Oz wants her.
My inspiration was more like, I was thinking more Charo meets Pia Zadora meets Lonnie Anderson, but deconstructed. So all of those are a little more on the glam and detailed side, but I wanted her to be a little more disheveled. Even when Oz was doing it, I just didn't want it to read too perfect because Oz is not a hairstylist.
Yes.
So I wanted it to always have a little bit of tawdry, like maybe I smoke cigarettes and drink black coffee kind of energy with her hair.
Which I should have added that to it because we didn't want it to look finished. I mean, it's Oz doing her lipstick and her eyeshadow, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think he'd be a little offended if you said he wasn't very good.
Okay.
You know, me and Oz is good friends.
But this episode also had, I thought, a moment of dressing down. You know, we got to see Eve naturally, as she likes to be when she's alone, as she likes to look when Oz isn't around. Brian, tell me about that.
That was fun. And Carmen is always a trooper when it comes to character development. I've worked with her before. And she definitely championed for, I don't want to look too pulled together. This is a woman who spends her whole life putting on a facade and for the men in her life, you know, in the club world, the underground world. So to me, to show this through her hairstyling and the character, she's vulnerable, she's in her house. It's like you get to see behind the curtains. And how do you do that? And what you saw in 106 is that version of it, especially in front of somebody like Sophia, who is got one above. She has one on her because she's coming to kill her, basically. Sophia's decked to the nines, coming through looking glamorously threatening. And to have Carmen or like Eve in this position, almost like you get to see my underbelly in this moment. Like, to me, that whole like combat moment was really great to see, and to see how it was played out with the design of the hair and makeup and even her apartment. Like, you would think Eve's apartment, the way she presents herself in her outdoor appearance, you would think she'd be slightly more pulled together, but you see she's vulnerable and not pulled together at all, you know.
And I thought I saw wigs in her.
You did see wigs, you know, because that's her thing. She's costuming. She plays characters all the time in her world, and with Oz and with everybody. Just like she said, Oz doesn't really like to see her in her natural state. They want the fantasy.
I mean, this whole show, I feel like I've also seen Oz work to look good. You know, the slick hair, the expensive style. This episode, I think it was when he was in the sewers, I just had a thought for the first time. Is he letting himself go a bit? What does that mean?
I didn't think he was letting himself go on purpose. I just think there's some moments that was intense and he was in it. So naturally some things are going to move out of place, because to keep it stark perfect all the time would just be a little more unrealistic. So, but he definitely is a dude that leans into the dapper of it. And that could be because of where he comes from. He had nothing and now he wants this power and all the things. So he has to make himself presentable so that he can come across like the boss, which is what he's slowly doing with everybody and kind of manipulating the whole situation.
But it also feels like this show doesn't want him to get too dapper. You know, it doesn't want him to be that penguin who's got the top hat, the tuxedo, the monocle, the cane. So were you actively avoiding getting too on the nose with him? Like, where was the line there?
I think that's a daily discussion, and we definitely didn't want you. You need to keep it in the world, that underground world. So in that whole universe, perfection sort of doesn't exist, even if it is like rich or whatever. There's always an edge to everything, just because this is not normal life. This is Gotham, so to speak, you know? So there's definitely an undergroundness to it.
What was the biggest challenge for you both?
And I would say for me is not disappointing this world. I took this character creation very seriously because I know the fan base, everybody has strong opinions about it. So I felt like I had a lot of responsibility to continue what is somewhat of a legacy and make this, with also telling my part to it without going off brand. So for me, that was that dance I had to do constantly in my head. Like, this is DC Batman land, Batman world. Like, I gotta make all the fans proud. Like, plus the producers, plus Matt Reeves, Dylan Clark, like everybody. There was so many people that was running through my mind that I did not want to disappoint.
What about you, Martha?
For myself, the little thing that I didn't want any looks to be generic at all, or I wanted everything to be with intentionality. Like the liner, anything where things were placed, what the different looks for Sophia, for Carmen, for Francis. I just wanted with intentionality, all the little nuances.
And I have one last question before we go, and I'll start with you on this one, Brian. Did you have a personal favorite character on the show to work on?
It was Sophia, without a doubt, because she just had her arc for me in storytelling as a hairstylist was like really, I mean, she literally went from one end of the spectrum to the total other end of the spectrum. Classic, innocent, young beauty to maniac, crazy, futuristic, edgy. Like, I got, like, that to me doesn't happen often in my career. Like, the look is sort of the same throughout the whole film, So to be able to do that, like, is hands down Sophia for me.
What about you, Martha?
I would say the same thing. It was Sophia, Kristen. Being able to just have, first of all, the freedom to collaborate with her and be creative, and the de-evolution, to evolution, just seeing her different personas, and it's still the same person but being different. Like, because sometimes you can be doing a project, right, and you're able to do all these different looks, but it just doesn't. You just feel like, there shouldn't be this many looks. Why do we have these many looks? There shouldn't be this many looks. But with Sophia, it's like every look told a story.
Oh, I like that. Oh, Brian and Martha, this has been such a great chat. I was really looking forward to this conversation.
Same here. It's been fun. Thank you, Amy.
Oz gets the power, and Sophia gets the jump on Victor and Francis, Oz's supposedly dead mom. Sophia wants nothing more than to see Oz suffer, to hurt him physically and emotionally, so that she can hear him scream the way that she did when she saw Alberto's corpse back in episode 1. Will he? We'll find out next week. Stream new episodes of The Penguin Sundays, 9 p.m. Eastern, and then join me and my guest back here for the next episode of the official companion podcast. This was an OBB Sound production and hosted by me, Amy Nicholson. Executive producers for OBB Sound are Michael D. Ratner, Scott Ratner, Arlen Konopaki, and Elias Tanner. Produced by Toby Lawless. Production manager is Brian Burgett. Engineered by Josh Falcon. Our editor and mixer is also Josh Falcon. Booking coordinator is Tess Bartholomew. Research producer is Jesse Holland. Executive producers for HBO are Becky Rowe and Savon Slater. Executives in charge of production for DC are Mike Pilata and Victor Diaz.